الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وشفيعنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وبعد. Respected elders, dear brothers and sisters, my friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we find ourselves in the month of Sha'ban, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or rather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, has told us that it is a month of which many people are neglectful. And subhanAllah, as we see the calendar and the dates go by, we are at the 11th of March and the month of Ramadan is likely to begin on the night of April 1st. So that means that there is basically, approximately 21 days until we enter the month of Ramadan, inshallah. And at that point, we hope, inshallah, first of all, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take us to that point. That is why we make the dua, Allahumma barik lana fi sha'ban wa ballighna Ramadan, ameen, because it is something which is not guaranteed. Right? It is something that is not guaranteed for anyone. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the blessing of the month of Ramadan once again. Alhamdulillah, we have sent out a Ramadan survey, which mashallah around, I think about 40 people have filled out so far. So if you have not had a chance, please do fill it out. tinyurl.com/Ramadan 2022. And I believe that's the URL. But nonetheless, you can find it on our Facebook page. And alhamdulillah, we sense great excitement, right, about the month of Ramadan, especially because our Ramadan has been, I don't want to say limited, but it has been somewhat different for the last 2 years. So inshallah, we look forward to having a normal Ramadan as possible, as normal of a Ramadan as possible. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it a blessed and exciting and fulfilling Ramadan for us. Ameen. Of course, one of the most important things, actions that are specific for the month of Ramadan, or that are not obligatory at any other time, is the fasting of the month of Ramadan. This is something which is known, I think, to everyone, alhamdulillah. But the fasting comes with certain guidelines as well. And of course, as believers, as Muslims, what does a Muslim mean? Muslim means someone who submits to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who submits to the guidance, the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So as Muslims, we should want to try to do all of our acts of worship in the best way possible, right? In the most perfect way possible, knowing that none of us are perfect, and therefore we will be lacking in some way, in one way or the other, but the effort and the intention should be there, that we want to try to have a as complete and as perfect of a practice of worship as much as possible. And of course, for the guidelines, we go first of all to the Book of Allah and the words of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and based on those teachings, the fuqaha, the jurists of this ummah, have then extrapolated various rulings that have to do with all of the things that we do, and that includes fasting as well. Alhamdulillah. So first and foremost, the intention tonight, inshallah, is to go over some of the frequently asked questions. The basics, I think everyone is pretty much aware of as far as fasting is concerned. So inshallah, we'll just go over some of the questions that are often asked with regards to fasting, and what happens if I do this or I do that, or various scenarios, inshallah. So the first thing, of course, to note is fasting, we all know, is obligatory, pillar of Islam. The Ramadan fasting is obligatory on males, on females, on everyone who is sane and who has reached bulugh, who has basically is considered to be Islamically mature. Okay, so when a person hits puberty, essentially that is when the fasting of Ramadan becomes obligatory upon them. But we also learn from the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that indeed it was the practice of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the community around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that they would train their children to start fasting at an earlier age, to the point where in some narrations we find the description that the children were crying right, out of hunger, and it was basically the parents felt it was appropriate for them to still fast so that they learn the value of fasting, and then that they also become accustomed and trained, to fast. That's not to say that we should force our children when they're very young and force them to fast and when they don't want to and make it difficult for them, especially when they're going to school and all of that. So that is not the purpose or the intention. But the point is to try to encourage them to fast. And a lot of times when we want our children to do something, there's two ways we can convince them to do it, right? We can use the approach of giving incentives and rewards, or we can use the approach of warning them of consequences, right? Of course, the first approach is sweeter, it's much nicer. The second approach is really not one that you want to have to take, right? So when it comes to fasting, especially for young children, actually, to be honest, the experience generally is often that when children see that their family members, their parents, their older siblings are fasting, then in most cases, I think children also want to fast themselves, right? Because that is the environment around them. And subhanAllah, this is the effect of the environment around us, right? That when we see everyone around us doing something, then naturally we become inclined. There's a good chance that we will naturally become inclined to want to do it as well. So children generally want to start fasting by themselves, and this is something I try to explain, to teachers and others who are not Muslim, that we don't force our children, to fast, but most of our children, like sometimes children are young and they're in school, and they'll tell the teacher, "Oh, I'm fasting," and the teacher's worried because the days are long, and they're worried for the well-being of the child. They're thinking maybe they're being forced to fast, but actually, in most cases, actually the child themselves who wants to fast because they see the value of it in their family, in their community, and they want to be like everyone else. But the obligation starts when a child becomes baligh or becomes baligha, hits maturity. From an Islamic point of view, they Islamically become an adult and they become mukallaf, meaning that they become accountable for the injunctions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala apply to them at that point, and they become accountable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for their actions, for their deeds and their misdeeds. So that is, just to get that out of the way. Now, in terms of the time, that is something that I often, the reason, I mean, again, it's a basic thing, but the reason why I mention it is because a lot of times I find people mistakenly misrepresenting the fasting time period. Okay, so fasting is not from sunrise to sunset. A lot of times, I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say that, whether in the media or whether they're explaining fasting to someone who doesn't know what fasting is, and they say, "Oh, as Muslims, we fast from sunrise to sunset." We don't fast from sunrise to sunset. We fast from dawn to sunset. And the reason for this, of course, where we get that from is from Surah Al-Baqarah in ayah number 187. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ ثُمَّ أَتِمُوا الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that eat and drink until the white thread of dawn becomes apparent, becomes clear, becomes distinct to you from the black thread of night, and then complete the fast until the night. Okay, and when do these threads start coming into the sky? Right, it is at the time of dawn. That is considered to be the break of dawn. This is when the sun is getting closer to the horizon before sunrise, before it starts getting all orange and yellow, and when the first crack of dawn appears, when the whiteness appears and starts spreading horizontally into the darkness in the night. And the reason why I like to give this detail sometimes, even for the fasting and also for the prayer timings, is when I was teaching children, I would tell them, I said, let's imagine that you find yourself on an island and there's no one there, and you don't have a watch, you don't have a clock, you don't have a phone, and you need to know the time to be able to pray. So how are you going to tell? You look at the sky and you look at the movements of the sun. So similarly for fasting as well, we should be clear about when the time actually starts. Now, there's a couple of questions that come that are related, that are directly related to this. And the first thing is, do I need to stop eating at Fajr or a bit before Fajr? Okay, should I stop eating? Because in many calendars or in many places, you will hear the idea of imsak about 10 minutes before Fajr time of people stopping to eat. So this was actually, I mean, there's a bit of discussion around this, but this was essentially an established practice of many of the Salaf, of the early pious predecessors. But there is a difference of opinion, and some consider it to be unnecessary and a blameworthy innovation. So that is why you will find that some scholars or some people will say that no, you should eat up until the last time until the adhan for Fajr is given, and some will say no, you should stop eating a little bit earlier. And you could say that it is a valid difference of opinion. However, one thing you will notice is the calendar that has been published by the Council of Imams of Ottawa Gatineau. You will find that there is a stop eating time and then there is a Fajr prayer time. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that is because the timings for Fajr actually vary by a few minutes across the entire region because the region is so big. So, for example, someone is in Orleans, right? They will actually get Fajr first versus someone who is in Canada or maybe in Arnprior or somewhere west of here. So that is why the calendar has a stop eating time, which is the earliest time of Fajr in the region, and then the Fajr prayer time is the latest Fajr time in the region. So that way everyone is covered, so that no one is eating into Fajr time. And that leads us to another question that people quote this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that if you're eating, if you have a morsel in your mouth, or you're taking a drink, so along those lines, and then if the adhan is called, then you basically should continue finish eating or drinking what you have in your mouth, right? So let us be clear: when Fajr time comes in, okay, when you are certain that the time for Fajr has set in, then it is not permissible to eat or drink or swallow anything at that point. Okay? The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the scholar says, referring to at his time, there used to be two adhans that would be given. Right? One was the actual adhan for Fajr to indicate that the eating time was over and now it was time for Fajr, there will be no more eating. But then there would also be, before that, a little bit earlier than that, there would be another adhan, and that would be sort of like the warning adhan. Okay, to tell you that the time is coming near so that you should wrap up your eating. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he said that, the scholars say that when he said that you should finish eating what you're eating when the adhan is called, that was for the first adhan, which was an indicator, which was like a warning that the second and final adhan was coming up very soon, right? And the time duration between that, Allah knows best, but from what I recall, it was very short, right? So, for example, Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu anhu will go up, he'll give the adhan and come back. And then shortly right after, by the time we come back, then Bilal radiallahu anhu will go up and give the other adhan. So the time period between was not much, but it was to say that when the first adhan, meaning the first warning adhan is given, then at that point, if you have something in your mouth, finish it up. But then when the actual adhan for Fajr is given, then you are not to eat anything. So that should be clear. Now, when it comes to breaking the fast, right? Sometimes people ask, they say, okay, well, it looks too bright outside. It looks too bright outside, so maybe I'm not going to break my fast yet. I'm going to delay it a little bit. And actually, the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is to break the fast closest to sunset, as closest as sunset to possible. And what is sunset? Well, sunset is not when the sky becomes dark or starts to become darker, but rather sunset is when the sun just literally disappears off the horizon, right? So the moment the sun goes down, that is the time when you can and you should break your fast. Now, again, in the calendar, there may be an extra minute or two to cover for variances in the region, but essentially, when you know that it's time for Maghrib, and especially when the published time arrives, then you should not delay after that, and you should break your fast right at that point. So this is with regards to when to stop eating and when to start eating once again. Now, of course, doing suhoor is a sunnah and has been recommended by the Prophet ﷺ. So even if you don't feel like getting up for suhoor and you feel like it's going to be cumbersome, you're too tired, whatever the case may be, at the very least, keep a date or some dates and water, which is sunnah to have in suhoor, the dates. So keep that by your bedside and try to put an alarm and you get up and just have a date at least and have some water. And that way you will be fulfilling the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and it will be a great means of immense barakah for you, inshallah. The sunnah also is to eat the suhoor closer to the Fajr time. Okay, not to have it very early. Again, if you need to have it early because for some reason, okay, fine, but the right way to do it, or the proper way to do it, is to have suhoor closer to Fajr time and eat up to essentially the Fajr adhan, if possible, but being careful not to overeat past the adhan. Okay, So that is with regards to timing. Now, another question that comes up is with regards to medical, issues, not issues, but like procedures during the time of fasting. So, for example, are blood tests or vaccinations or ear eye drops allowed while fasting? Right. So, this is something that often comes up. So, blood tests, anything where blood is being drawn from your body or donating blood, there's a great need for blood. So donating blood or having a blood test, uh, any of those things, they will not invalidate your fast. There is no concern there. There is no issue there. The only concern probably could be that you might become weak if you end up donating too much blood or something while you're fasting. So you want to try, if it's going to lead to weakness, then you want to try to avoid it, of course. But otherwise, drawing of blood or taking in vaccinations, is no issue. The only thing also the scholars will say is that the injection, if someone is taking a shot, it should not have um, nutritional value. If it has no nutritional value, then everyone agrees that there's no issue with taking any shots. So, for example, if you're taking a COVID vaccine or any other vaccine, or you're traveling, you need to take a shot, whatever the case may be, there's no nutritional value in it. There's no issue there. However, if it does give strength, then some of the scholars say that that type of shot would not be permissible because it is similar to or equivalent to food, right? So if you have a some sort of shot or like an eye or something that will give a person strength, then in that case, not every all the scholars, but some of them will say that it would invalidate the fast because it is the equivalent of food. Another question is with regards to nasal spray. So if I have to spray something in my nose in terms of medication, is that going to invalidate my fast? So the answer is that it is permissible. It is not going to invalidate the fast, inshallah, provided it doesn't go below the throat. Okay, so whenever there's something going inside your nose, inside your mouth while you're fasting, you want to make sure that you're not swallowing it. Okay, that's not going beyond your throat. Once it starts, once it crosses your throat, then you've got a problem. But until then, should be okay, inshallah. Now, this is also disputed, and it's interesting because a lot of the early books of fiqh, have certain rulings with regards to, water, for example, somebody sniffing their water too hard in wudu, or sprays and things like that, or water going in the ear. And a lot of the, I should say a lot, but some of the contemporary scholars will say that those rulings don't really apply anymore because, we have a better understanding of our anatomy. We have a better understanding of the body and which parts are connected. The whole point idea is that the liquid or the food should not enter into the main body cavity, right? So it should not be going down the throat or entering from any of the major pathways into the body. So the nasal spray generally should not be an issue, inshallah, provided that one is careful not to swallow it. Ear drops as well, it will not break your fasting. Originally, some fuqaha had said yes, but again, this is, as I described, it's something that we could say has sort of evolved, or because there's better understanding of the body, and eye drops as well. They will not break the fast as well. So if you need to take a shot, if you need to put a nasal spray, and you're careful about it, or you need to put eye drops because you have an eye infection or whatever, or ear drops, inshallah, all of those things should be fine and should not invalidate your fast. Another question we get with regards to eating forgetfully, right? So, somebody is not used to fasting. Ramadan is new. You get hungry. You're used to having a sip of water. You're used to going to the fridge or the cupboard and grabbing a snack. And a person, a person forgets and they eat, right? And does that break their fast? So the answer is no. Right? Eating something forgetfully, okay? Forgetting that you are fasting, which of course you can't do on purpose, right? So I mean, you can't be like, oh, I forgot I was fasting, and then you eat. If you forget, you forget. You truly forget. So if someone truly forgets, then nothing happens to their fast. And in some ways, in one case, one of the scholars has mentioned that a story where something like that happened, and basically it was said that this is the provision that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided you. This was Allah's way of providing you, nutrition and providing you food while you were fasting. Okay, but you can't do it intentionally. It has to be mistakenly, where you truly do not realize that you are fasting. Now, another question that comes up is if you see someone right? If you see someone who you know is fasting, so it could be a family member, it could be another person, and you see them eating, and they're fasting, should you tell them or not? Okay. So generally, in most cases, yes, you should remind them. Okay. So you should remind them, oh, aren't you fasting? You shouldn't be eating. But some of the scholars mention that if it's a person who probably is, who is maybe struggling in fasting and they need that nutrition, then maybe it's better not to say anything. If they have forgetfully, if they have forgotten that they're fasting, and they're going away, they're warming up their food, they're eating whatever they're doing, and they're weak and they're struggling, then leave it, because again, this is a way that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is providing them provision. A similar question is if a person, it's actually it's not similar, but it's sort of related. So this was the case of someone who forgets that they're fasting altogether. They totally forgot that they're fasting. They didn't realize they were fasting and they ate. But what about a person who thinks it is time for Maghrib? Okay, who believes that it's time for Maghrib, and they eat, they break their fast, and then they realize, oh, I looked at the wrong date on the calendar, or my I don't know, my clock was off or something, or I looked at the time for the wrong city, or something happens, and they realize that they've eaten sometime before sunset, or they have continued to eat after Fajr time. So they're having their suhoor, and then Fajr, time comes in, but they don't realize it, and they realize afterwards that, oh, Fajr came in like half an hour before, and I was continuing to eat. So in that case, the majority of the scholars will say that their fast has been invalidated. Okay, and that fast would have to be made up afterwards. Okay, they don't get any sin for that because it was a mistake, right? Like it wasn't intentional, so there's no sin there, inshallah. However, because it was not out of forgetfulness, but rather they consciously knew that they were fasting, but they made a mistake, then in that case, the majority of the scholars will say that it should be, or many of the scholars will say that it should be made up. There is a difference of opinion, so some will say that no, it's okay. But the better thing, the safer thing would be to make up that fast afterwards. Now, with regards to illness, a question comes up that, how sick do I need to be to break my fast? Of course, the root of that question is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has told us that of course, the fasting is prescribed upon all of us. So that is the general ruling, that fasting is for everyone. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the exceptions. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the exceptions. So, someone who is sick or who is a traveler, those are the two main categories that have been mentioned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the most of the scholars, including the four great imams of fiqh, are of the view that the sick person is not allowed to break their fast in Ramadan unless the sickness is severe. Unless the sickness is severe, right? So it's not like, I'm fasting and then I get a sneeze or two, or, a little bit of some allergies or something. And then, like it's still bearable. It's nothing really severe, but I'm just like, oh, I can't fast anymore. I'm going to break my fast. So what is meant by severe sickness? So severe sickness is either the sickness that will be made worse by fasting. Okay, so somebody has a condition, they're sick, and if they were to fast, then the sickness will get worse. So that will be number one. Number two, somebody who is sick and their recovery will be delayed because of fasting. Okay, so they are already ill in a serious way, and if they start fasting or if they continue fasting, they will not be able to recover, and it will get delayed. Number three, fasting will cause intense hardship, even if it does not make the sickness worse or delay the recovery. Okay, so someone is not well, they're sick, but they're sick to the point where if they fast, it will make it, it will cause them intense hardship. Okay, so for example, somebody is having, let's say, migraines, or extremely bad headaches, or something which is almost debilitating. They're not able to move around. They're not able to do any work. They're not able to get out of bed. And if they are to fast, then it will cause intense hardship upon them. Then in that case, it is also permissible for them to break their fast or to miss their fast. And fourthly, the scholars also included those who fear that they may become sick because of fasting. Okay, so people who have had experience in the past, they have a condition, or they've tried fasting, or they've been in certain situations and they know that when they've done it, they have become seriously ill, and they have a very legitimate fear. It's not just like an unfounded fear, but they have a legitimate fear based on experience, based on medical advice. Then in that case, they can also follow that dispensation, that excuse of not having to fast right then. Um, a person who is sick in principle is not required to fast, but they want to be careful because, of course, it's a serious thing to not fast, and the scholars generally mention that it should be confirmed by a qualified Muslim physician or a qualified physician who is a pious Muslim. Okay, now, why the condition of the pious Muslim? Because a pious Muslim will truly understand the value of fasting. Right? If you go to someone who is not a pious Muslim or who is not a Muslim, they may not understand, they may not appreciate the importance of the Sharia, of the sacred law. They may not understand or appreciate, the importance of the rules and regulations of fasting. And they may take it very lightly. So that is why a pious practicing Muslim, or if no such Muslim physician is available locally, or one is not able to get in touch with them, then a qualified physician who appreciates the importance of these rulings, the obligations for Muslims, that would also be that type of physician will also be sufficient, inshallah. So it's best that this matter not be taken lightly, and one consult with the people of knowledge, consult with doctors who are aware of this, inshallah, so that they can advise them accordingly. There is a question with regards to pregnancy or mothers who are feeding, right? So fasting will be left due to pregnancy or nursing if there is good reason to fear harm for the mother or for the baby, either based on experience or based on a reliable Muslim professional medical opinion. Or a non-Muslim doctor's medical opinion, medical judgment that confirms that there is good reason to fear harm, or some clear and unmistakable signs. So one can attempt to fast while taking the means to try to manage it, right, nutritionally, and to ensure that no harm is caused, or there's no undue difficulty. But if there's undue difficulty, then it should stop. And if it happens a few times, then it can be assumed that one is unable to fast unless the circumstances change. So, if you notice from all of these rulings, the encouragement is to try to complete the fast, to try to do it as much as possible. But if it seriously poses a risk of harm or intense hardship, then in those cases, it can be left out to be made up afterwards, inshallah. Yes, did you have a question?
Some people, they have to take medicine every day,
Mm-hmm.
but in Ramadan, and if they don't take the medicine, they'll be sick or something.
Yeah.
So in that case, will they be for the whole Ramadan they can do fasting?
That's a very good question. So people who take medication, people who are on regular medication that have to take medication, multiple times a day. So the most important thing is to get a consultation with the doctor before Ramadan starts. Okay, and go to the doctor and say, okay, well, these are my medication. Which ones am I able to take? Are there any that maybe I can double the dosage or take more during the times when I'm not fasting, so that I can make it through without eating them during the day while fasting? So having that discussion with the doctor and a pharmacist to try to figure out if there's any way, if there's any alternatives to their medication, or the times that they take them at. If there is no alternative and they have to take those medications, and if they don't, they risk serious harm to themselves, then they will be excused in that situation. And for example, if the and this is also for anyone who finds it extremely difficult, whether it's due to old age or other reasons, to fast when the days are longer, because now, alhamdulillah, they're getting shorter as we get closer to spring and winter, as Ramadan comes back. But still, the fasts are fairly long. So if a person is not able to fast when the days are long, so let's say because of their medication or because of their illness or weakness, or diabetes or whatever it is, they're not able to fast when the days are long, but they are able to do it when the days are short, then they'll simply not fast this Ramadan, or when the days are too long, but then they will make up those fasts when the days are short, right? So they could do them, they can make it up in, for example, in December. And of course, as Ramadan gets into the winter and the days get shorter, then if they're able to do the fast, then they will be required to do the fast. So when a person is not able to do it due to the length of the fasting or their circumstances, in those cases they will be excused. But once they are able to, then they will make up for those fasts and they will start fasting in Ramadan again. Did that answer your question? Alhamdulillah. So with regards to, because we talked about medication and feeding. So if a person is not able to fast, then what do they do? Okay, so as I mentioned, there's actually, let's put it this way: there's two categories of people who are not able to fast. One is the category of people who are not able to fast at all. Okay, they're not able to fast at all, and permanently they're not able to fast, and there's no hope that they'll be able to fast once again. So these are people who are perhaps too feeble, they are elderly, they have a serious medical condition which is unlikely to be cured. Then in those situations, they will not fast, and they will instead feed a portion for each day of fasting that they have missed. Somebody who is temporarily ill, somebody who is not able to fast because of circumstances which are expected to change, then that person will wait until they are cured or until their situation gets better, and then they will make up those fasts. The person who, the second category, who has a temporary issue, they will not need to give fidya or pay anyone for the fact that they have not been able to fast. The person who is permanently not able to fast or who is not expected to recover, and it is unlikely that they will ever be able to fast, those are the people who will give fidya. So what is fidya? The fidya is the payment given by those who are excused to fast with no hope of recovery as a substitute to fasting. It is now some of the scholars say that for someone who has missed fasting and they are able to make up the fast after Ramadan and they don't make it up before the next Ramadan, then they have to make it up and they have to give fidya. Okay, so this is one of the scholarly opinions from one of the madahib. Now, what is the fidya? Fidya is a feeding of a poor person each day in lieu of fasting. Okay, for the person who has no hope of recovery. And how much should be fed? Okay, so the actual instruction of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is half a sa' of staple food of that area. Okay, so it could be rice, it could be wheat, it could be flour, it could be dates, whatever is used in a particular area. And half a sa' is about, now there's various measurements or conversions that you're going to find, but ranging from 675, almost 700 grams to about 1.5, 1.6 grams, kilograms. Okay, so ranging from about 700 grams to about 1.5 or 1.6 kilograms. So 700 grams to about 1,500 or 1,600 grams. This is the range. So to be safe, you can say 1.5 kilograms or 1.6 kilograms of a staple food. And according to the majority, this should be given in the form of food. In the Hanafi school, it is permissible to give the cash equivalent of it as well. The cash equivalent, when I was looking at the prices today at Bulkburn, the prices range from about 35 cents per 100 grams, about $3.50 per kilo, to all the way up to about $5 or so. So we can say that the range is for 1.5 kilos. Let's say, to be safe, let's say from around $6 to $10 per day. Okay, and this is to be given to those who are needy, who are eligible for zakat, as a substitute for fasting. The better thing to do is to actually give the food, right? Because that way there's no difference of opinion. So give the food item, or one could simply feed a person, right? Because that will naturally include, the rice and other foods, and it's already prepared, so it's better. So, if one wants to give meat or actually give a meal to feed the needy, that is perfectly fine as well. Or at the bare minimum, it could be, 1.5 kilo, 1.6 kilograms of a local staple food for each day that is missed of fasting by those who have no hope of recovery to be able to make up their fast. Now, with regards to travelers, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the two categories of people that are excused from fasting are those who are sick and those who are travelers. So, when can a traveler not fast or break their fast? So, if one is able to fast while they're traveling, and this travel should be not just within the city but outside of the city, which is considered to be like shari'i travel, and there's various interpretations of what constitutes that. Some will say going outside of the city for 48 miles, about 77 kilometers, and so on, as an example. Then, for if one is traveling, can they break their fast or not? So the better thing to do is that if you're able to fast while traveling and it does not create any difficulty for you, not adds any extra hardship for you, it is better for you to just fast. Okay, and probably the good time to do that is if you're traveling to the east, right? If you're flying to the east and you leave here, in a state of fasting, your sunset is going to come very, very quickly, right? So it's actually going to be a very short day of fasting. So it actually is easier for you in fasting most likely. So go ahead and fast, and that way, it's easier for you. On the other hand, if you're flying west, I told that story before, if you remember or not. We were flying out of Hamilton to, I think it was Regina, Saskatchewan, and sunset I think was for like 35, or sorry, 4:38 in Hamilton, and the takeoff was at 4:35. So I said, okay, you know what? It's only 3 minute difference. So once we get in the air, it's maybe 3 minutes. We'll just break our fast and khalas, that way we don't have to make up the fast afterwards. Of course, the plane takes off and it's flying west. Okay, so the moment it takes off, all what seemed like sunset is gone, and you see the sun, and the sun's not leaving, right? Because you're flying west, so you're almost like the plane is competing with the plane, so the sun is just not leaving, right? So those 3 minutes basically got extended into like an hour and a half, of fasting. Alhamdulillah, it was okay. There's no issue. But basically, if it's going to create hardship or if it's going to be difficult, then you take the dispensation, you take the rukhsa, and you don't fast. In either way, if you fast or don't fast, it will still be valid. But in terms of what is better or what is advisable, um, now the majority of the scholars actually say, this is an important point, that a traveler may choose not to fast as long as they have left the city limits before Fajr time has set in. Okay, this is the view of the majority of the scholars. So, for example, your flight is taking off before Fajr time, okay, overnight, or sometime after Maghrib, and you get on the flight, and then Fajr time comes in during the flight, and you decide you're not going to fast because you're traveling. Okay, no problem. Or you arrive somewhere and you're still within the period of traveling, or you're in a state of traveling and you decide not to fast for those days. Okay, no problem. But if you are at home when Fajr time comes around and your flight is later in the day, then the majority of the scholars will say that at that point it would not be permissible for you to choose not to fast or to break your fast. Why? Because you are at home at that point and Fajr time has come in, and everyone who is at home in their hometown, they're not traveling, they are not sick, upon them it is obligatory to fast in Ramadan when Fajr time comes around, unless they have an excuse or they're not able to. For example, someone is in a state of, sisters are in a state of impurity, they're not able to fast, or they're not, advised to fast at that time. It's not permissible to fast. Then, of course, that is excused. But otherwise, the obligation is there to start the fast. And of course, once they are in the journey, then it would, according to the majority, from my understanding, that it would not be permissible for them to break that fast either once that fast has started. Now, the Hanabila hold a view in the Hanbali school that allows a fasting person who left the city limits after Fajr to open their fast, to break their fast once they are considered to be an actual traveler. So there's a little bit of a discussion there. So basically, if you're traveling in Ramadan, just be aware of what the rulings are, be aware of what your flight times are, be aware of what your circumstances are going to be if you're going to act upon this dispensation, this rukhsah, to not fast while you are traveling. Question with regards to toothpaste or a mouthwash. Is that something that you can use while you're fasting? The answer is that yes, you could, although it is maybe better to, or some say it should be avoided due to the risk of swallowing, right? Because of course it goes into the mouth, and it's possible that you might end up swallowing mistakenly, but not forgetfully. So if you mistakenly end up swallowing, then you will have to redo that fast, although you will not be sinful, inshallah. But it is permissible to do it. And of course, the Prophet ﷺ also used miswak during fasting as well. So that is also something which is permissible. If a person forgets to eat their suhoor, and the fast is very long, what are their options? Okay, and this is why I always advise, especially when the days are long, I always advise people that if you are going to take a nap or go to sleep at night, make sure that you have something to drink and something to eat before you lay down. Because you don't want to be in a situation that you're hungry, thinking you're going to wake up for suhoor, and then you oversleep, and then you wake up when Fajr time has already come in, and then now you have a big problem because you have to go to work, you have to go to school, you have a long day ahead, and might be hot or whatever, and you are not prepared for it. So that is why always before you take a nap at night, make sure that you have something to drink, something to eat, so that at least you are covered. Now, if you forget to eat suhoor and the fast is very long, know that fasting is a test for patience, and this happens during Ramadan. Try to nap. One thing I've realized that when you're feeling low, you're feeling hungry, feeling thirsty, if you take a nap, then that gives a chance to your body to reset, and and inshallah you will feel better once you wake up. If you start feeling seriously sick, then you try to rest, and if it doesn't help and your condition continues to worsen, then you may break your fast. Okay, so people ask, okay, well, it's very hot, it's something, can I break my fast? I say, well, no, you should try to fast first. But if you find yourself in a situation where it's intensely hard, there's intense hardship for you, you're getting dizzy, you can't operate, you're getting really sick, and it's causing you serious issues and a serious threat to your well-being, then at that point you can break your fast. Another question you get is, can I not fast on the day that I have an exam or a sports tournament? You have a track meet, you have a basketball tournament, there's a soccer tournament, or I have I have a major exam. So know that exams and sports tournaments, they may be very important to you, for various reasons. That's fine, but they are not valid excuses for missing the fast. Now, for those who have to travel for a tournament, they can maybe take the dispensation of being a traveler and not fast. But otherwise, if you're in your hometown and you have an exam or you have a sports tournament, then that's not really a valid excuse, a good enough excuse for missing or skipping an obligation from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Normally, with an exam, you can request an accommodation beforehand for religious reasons and seek ways of working around it. And if it's not possible, then try to drink plenty of fluid the night before, have a good suhoor, be well rested, make dua to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and try your best, inshallah. And again, if you start feeling seriously sick, then you can break your fast. And the same thing goes for the sports as well. And for sports, you may decide to sacrifice the sporting event altogether for the sake of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, because the fasting is something which is prescribed, obligatory from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and much more important than a sports tournament. Question about, and I'm going to end with this, inshallah. Question about swimming and going to the dentist. Okay, similar to the toothpaste and mouthwash question. So, is it permissible to swim while you are fasting? Yes, it is permissible. However, you have to be very careful that you're not going to swallow any water in a state of fasting. Otherwise, that will invalidate your fast. Going to the dentist, having work done on your teeth, there's nothing wrong with that. However, if there's water that's going to be put into your mouth, and there's a chance you may swallow it, then it's something that you might want to avoid. But in essence, it is not something which is prohibited. Question online: can I miss a day for appointments and then make it up after Ramadan? So again, the default is that for everyone who is not a traveler and who is physically capable of fasting, then it is incumbent upon them to fast on that day and not to miss that day. However, if there is a medically necessary appointment which involves a procedure that will invalidate a person's fast, and it is necessary to get that procedure, otherwise it's going to cause them serious harm or delay their recovery, look, it has serious implications on their well-being and their health, then in that case, yes, you can. It's better actually to start the fast, not to miss the day. Start the fast, and then when something happens, that will break the will that will nullify the fast. Then the fast gets invalidated, and then you make up for it afterwards. Basically, you want to try your best as much as possible to fast if you're able to fast, if you're capable of fasting, until there are circumstances beyond your control that cause that fast to be invalidated, right? You don't want to be in a situation that the time of Fajr comes and you choose willingly not to fast that day because something's going to happen. You start the fast because what if the appointment gets canceled or something happens? So don't start the day not fasting. Start the day with fasting, and then if circumstances present themselves that end up invalidating your fast, or you end up having to break your fast because of those circumstances, then inshallah, that will be excused. So I hope that answers your question. Inshallah. All right, so inshallah, with that, I think that covers many of the questions that we get. Alhamdulillah. So I want to say Jazakumullahu khairah, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make fasting easy for all of us who are able to fast. And for those who are not able to fast, and I know a lot of our elders or people who are sick, they feel very, very guilty because they've been fasting all their lives, or they feel really bad about missing their fast. And to them, I want to say that if you are sincerely wanting to fast and you're not able to, you should not feel guilty, because at the end of the day, this is something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the dispensation, the rukhsah, has also come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you should, instead of feeling guilty, try to feel grateful that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it easier and has given you that rukhsah. And I mean, it's natural, to want to do good deeds and feel sad when you're not able to, but please don't take it to the point where it brings you down and you feel constantly stressed, or you constantly feel down because you have not been able to fast. MashaAllah, I'm sure that everyone has tried to fast whenever they were able to, and now when circumstances present that you're presented with circumstances that are beyond your control, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you take that as be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has given you the opportunity in the past, and He has given you a way out in this situation when you're not able to fast. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows your feelings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows your intentions, and inshallah, just make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He grants you the reward of fasting, because we learn from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that when a person has a habit of doing good deeds, when a person has been continuous in doing good deeds, and then due to some circumstances beyond their control, they're not able to fast, inshallah, they will still get the reward. Or when they're not able to do those good deeds, then inshallah, they will still continue to get the reward as if they are continuing to do those good deeds. So as long as you've been consistent in the past, and you have the right intentions, and you wish you could have, then inshallah, be hopeful and be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, Allah Azza wa Jal will reward you greatly for your patience, and will continue to reward you, inshallah, for as if you have continued to fast. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our fasting. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to fast in the best way possible. May Allah Azza wa Jal grant us acceptance, closeness to Him, and grant us the true benefits of fasting. Ameen. Ya Rabbal Alameen. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.